And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this exclusive interview. Now, the Wola Massacre remains one of the most harrowing episodes of World War II, where between 40 to 50,000 Polish civilians were systematically murdered by German forces in Warsaw's Wola district in August 1944. This brutal act was ordered in an attempt to crush the Warsaw Uprising, and atrocities committed during this period continues to evoke strong emotion and serve as a stark reminder of the horrors of war. Joining us today on TVP World to delve into this tragic chapter of history is Marek Wierzbicki, a distinguished Polish historian. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So let's actually start by diving into some of the controversies, because a lot of the discussion is on whether or not the Warsaw Uprising is a properly planned good idea, as we've seen as the result of it was the massacre.
The Warsaw Uprising, first of all, aimed to liberate Warsaw before the Red Soviet armies came. But the insurgent forces were stuck between the German army and the Soviet army, and none of them wished the insurgents success. And the insurgents were equipped very poorly, and therefore their action was to be a kind of a political and military manifestation to show the Soviets and the whole of the world that the Polish nation wants a sovereign state, wants a sovereign government. But for Germans, it was very uncomfortable, because the Warsaw Uprising was one of the actions that undermined the strength of the German troops on the east bank of the Vistula River, and the troops were fighting against the Soviet onslaught. And therefore, Hitler and Himmler decided to take this opportunity and to destroy Warsaw, including its inhabitants.
Right, and nowadays there are two schools of thought about the uprising. Well, some people think it's doomed to fail, and some see it as a romantic necessity. Do you think these are two simplistic views of looking at the uprising and the subsequent massacre?
First of all, we should realize that we shouldn't have a look at the uprising and evaluate it from today's point of view. In July, late July 1944, very little was certain for the Home Army, the main Polish military organization, but they wanted to make a political manifestation. So I think that they had rather no choice at that time, but they selected a bad moment for the start of the uprising, because the Germans became stronger at that time militarily, and started their counter-offensive against the Soviet army on the east bank of the Vistula River. And so we can say that the uprising broke out prematurely, a little bit too early. But on the other hand, probably the high command of the Home Army had no choice, because otherwise Germans would turn Warsaw into a fortress to defend it from the Soviet offensive. So anyway, Warsaw and its inhabitants would be involved in heavy fightings, and the casualties could be really severe.
Right, and at the time, well, the order from Himmler is to, quote, kill anything that moves. What's the primary motivation to pursue something so extreme, to commit such extreme atrocities?
First of all, both Hitler and Himmler hated the Poles and considered Poland as the main obstacle on the German expansion to the east. And as we remember from Hitler's book Mein Kampf, the main living space, as it was called, Lebensraum in German, was to be located for the Germans in the east of Europe up to the Ural Mountains. So Poland was the main obstacle on this expansion, and therefore Himmler, as he recollected, he advised Hitler to take this opportunity and to destroy Warsaw up to the ground level, and to destroy and to exterminate all the inhabitants of the city. And that was the original order issued by Hitler and then Himmler to annihilate all the city together with its inhabitants.
And when that took place, were there any opportunity for the Polish Home Army to assist these citizens, or were they simply just unable to react to it?
It was hardly possible because the German troops started marching from the outskirts of the Wola district towards the center of Warsaw, and they had a huge preponderance over the insurgents' troops. And most of the Wola district was occupied by the Germans, and the first fighting during the first days in the Wola district became unsuccessful for the insurgent forces, and therefore the insurgents were not able to protect the civilians from the atrocities they experienced.
All right, and despite these atrocities, we don't see a lot of German perpetrators being prosecuted post-war. Do you think that has any impact on collective memory and justice for the victims?
Yes, it is a strange thing that, first of all, the most important perpetrators have never been prosecuted for this terrible war crime or even genocide. And on the other hand, the Wola Massacre was also hardly remembered in the collective memory across Europe, especially in Germany, but also in Poland. And only during the last 35 years, the memory has become more vivid, with more research, more publications regarding that issue. But this is a sad paradox that the main symbol of this terrible crime on the German side, SS General Heinz Reinefeld, was never prosecuted for that. On the contrary, he made a successful career as a politician in post-war Germany. Was even the mayor of Westerland, a city in the north of Germany, and then a deputy to a regional parliament, Landtag, of the Schleswig-Holstein land. And he died in 1979. He was given by West German government a general's pension, and he was treated like a decent man. It was a really sad paradox.
All right, you mentioned something very interesting that I want to draw attention on the collective memory of this Wola Massacre actually being more vivid in modern times and recent years as more information surface, which, well, a little bit counterintuitive when we look at history. Usually we would assume that people who live closer to it probably has a stronger memory of it. Can you help us understand how that happened?
First of all, in the first years after the end of the Second World War and the Warsaw Uprising, there were many witnesses to the events that had taken place there and then. For example, a symbolic gesture was a testimony of a woman who became a symbol of this tragedy, of this Wola Massacre, Wanda Lurie, who was shot by the Germans together with her 3 little children, but she was also in the ninth month of her pregnancy. So she miraculously survived the killing, and then she gave birth on the 20th of August 1944, gave birth to her 4th child, her son. And she and many other witnesses who survived this killing describe this unimaginable crime when German soldiers and policemen herded thousands of Wola's inhabitants and then shot them dead in a mass systematic shooting. And many witnesses gave their testimonies regarding this horrible crime. But the Polish government even wanted Heinz Reinefeld, the commander of the German troops, to be extradited to Poland, but this request was refused by the West German authorities. So, especially in the recent years, this problematics has become vivid again, probably on the wave of interest in the Warsaw Uprising, and the next generations also are interested in finding more about those events. And also the Wola district has become a symbol of one of the worst Nazi German crimes during the Second World War in occupied Europe.
All right, and then drawing our attention back to the modern day, we are looking at places that are on the brink of conflict or already embroiled in a very strong conflict. So when looking back at history, what lessons should contemporary societies learn from the events in Wola during August 1944?
First of all, that we should pay attention to imperialist ambitions of Russia, first of all, because the Russian troops were able to help the uprising in 1944, but they did not do so, awaiting until the Germans destroyed the uprising and killed thousands of civilians and insurgents. So we should be aware that this history can repeat, and we should be watchful and be ready to defend our freedom.
Well, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks again for being with us on TVP World.
My pleasure.
And with that, we conclude our interview, but please stay tuned for TVP World for more news and updates.